Welcome to the S.H.A.R.E podcast, where we talk about sex, relationships, and culture. Kassia, what time is it?
Christmas time!
It is Christmas time in the city, as they say in some Christmas songs.
And the suburbs, and the farms, and the mountains, and everywhere. It's Christmas everywhere.
I suppose.
Yes.
My preference is the city, but I guess we can make room for the mountains and everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. You've convinced me.
Thanks. That was hard.
We have a great show lined up. We're going to talk about some really cool stuff. We're going to talk about the rush of Christmas. We're going to talk about filters. We're going to talk about virgin births. What? I know. It's going to be great. And we have a very lovely special guest. Our Center Operations Director, S.H.A.R.E Gillman, is here with us today. Hello. Also known as Princess Snickerdoodle.
Only to you, Carl.
Yes. Yes. The story behind that is there is one thing I know about Miss S.H.A.R.E Gillman, and that is she loves Christmas.
I do.
When I was first hired at the Atwell Center, I walked in like June and saw Christmas ornaments, and I was like, "What is this? What? Why?"
Yep.
It's never too early to get ready for Christmas.
I sure.
Well, and at work we have to do Christmas stuff in the summer because we're so busy with gala and stuff in this fourth quarter.
This is why you're the Center Operations Director.
Yep.
But at the time, there was like this whole thing with like elf on a shelf. And I asked Sarah, I was like, what is your elf name? And she didn't have one. So I said, well, Princess Snickerdoodle.
Princess Snickerdoodle it
And
is.
it's stuck ever since.
It has. Because Sarah means princess,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And Snickerdoodle is your favorite coffee, correct? Or
No, I think you just,
wrong.
you are wrong, but that's okay. It is a really good cookie. It's full of sugar. Like it just has sugar all over it.
There was a Starbucks flavor, Snickerdoodle.
Yes, there was. Yes. And I
that's
did
how it
enjoy
happened.
that. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
And now we know.
Now you know.
It's a Christmas miracle. But we are going to talk a lot about specifically Christmas time. And I want to kind of hone in on that word, time. Because I think that with everything in Christmas, usually there's a lot of rushing, there's a lot of extra stress. And according to the American Psychological Association, 38% of people say that their stress increases during the holidays. And only 8% of people say that they actually feel happier during Christmas.
That's very surprising.
Right?
Yeah, that's a big number.
Yeah, it is. That actually like really surprised me because when I think about Christmas, I think actually about like slowing down and like.
It honestly doesn't really surprise me.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see it like numerically.
On the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's this amazing quote by Dietrich Bonhoeffer who said, the celebration of Advent, which is Christmas time, we're in the season of Advent right now. The celebration of Advent is possible only to those troubled in soul, who know themselves to be poor and imperfect, and who look forward to something greater to come. And I love that because it doesn't like shy away from the fact that a lot of us feel a little bit poor in soul sometimes during the holidays. It's not always, snowflakes and rainbows and Princess Snickerdoodle, although Princess Snickerdoodle is awesome. But sometimes the holidays can be hard. And it's only when we realize that, there is hard stuff that then we can also be grateful for the things that we do have, which is really cool.
Definitely.
Yeah. So let's get into our questions. We have questions about sex. We have questions about relationships, and we have questions about culture.
Are we going to do introductions too?
We should.
Maybe. People know who we are maybe if they've been listening, but they might not know much about S.H.A.R.E.
That's true. I think that if you don't know who Kassia is by now, you need to start over.
Go back to number one.
Go back to number one because she's awesome. But we do have a special guest, S.H.A.R.E Gillman. Would you do me a please? Would you do me a favor and introduce yourself by telling people who you are, your education, work, something Christmassy, quirky, and a passion of yours? That'd be fantastic.
Sure, definitely. So my name is Sarah Gillman, and I have a degree from Tyndale University in business administration, and I focused all my studies in nonprofit management. It wasn't a degree back when I took it, but now other universities across Canada are actually offering it as a degree, which I'm really excited to see because nonprofits really need the business support. And I'm a bit biased because that's my bread and butter, which is probably leads to a passion of mine, but I'll get to that in a second. As you've mentioned, I'm the Center Operations Director at the Atwell Center. And so what does that mean? Means I support the team behind the scenes and doing all the business type things. So everything from HR to finance to strategy, logistics, budgeting, all those solving problems.
Fun
That's
things.
kind of
Yeah.
my job.
Yeah, basically everyone in the office is like, help! And Sarah parachutes in from the ceiling. It's great.
Yeah, that's what I do. A Christmas quirk, I guess, is the fact that I love buffalo plaid. And I don't know if it's necessarily Christmassy, but David and I, my husband, got married in February, and we had a buffalo plaid themed wedding. And he said to me a couple months ago, he said, we had a Christmas themed wedding. I said, no, it wasn't February. And he said, but it was buffalo plaid. And he's like, that's Christmas. And I was like, fine. So yes, I love buffalo plaid and all things Christmas. I love baking and all those things. Love having people over. And then a passion of mine would be to support people to fulfill their dreams. So that's kind of why I went into nonprofit management. Is I grew up seeing so many passionate people who had these incredible ideas to support and serve humanity. And I wanted to help them with all the paperwork so that they wouldn't get burnt out by the logistics, and then they were able to do what God had gifted them. So I kind of say that I help transition people from passion to legacy. And that's what I see myself doing at Atwell. So, yeah.
Well, that's what we see you doing at Atwell. That was really cool. Like last month we had our gala,
Yes, we did.
and when it comes to like transitioning and like fulfilling dreams and stuff, I think we did pretty well.
Yeah, we did. We exceeded our goal, which was amazing.
Yeah.
It's always, when we set the budget every year, it's always on faith. And it's really amazing to see how God provides and how he pulls through every year, and then how we can continue to grow in that faith. Like the podcast, for example, was a new thing that we did in 2022, I guess we're in right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a big faith piece that we did. And look, we're here, and
Very exciting.
and it's so exciting, and we're getting really good response from it, and it's really encouraging.
It's been so much fun. It's been really cool to see exactly what you said, like the way that God is pulling things together, and the way that this team has come together. It's been really awesome.
When Carl told me we were going to the internet, I did not really believe it, to be honest.
What?
And I was like, sure, Carl, whatever you say. And now here we are. So
Yep. Lucy, you believed it too, right? Yes.
And for those who don't know, Lucy is
Nope, she did it.
Lucy is off camera. She's directing and producing this.
Carl's
shindig.
always charging ahead, and Lucy and I are like, whoa.
Yes, I'm thankful for Lucy on the team.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Lucy's the
Definitely.
best.
Especially when I don't have the privilege of being here every time, you know.
Yeah, she
To know that Lucy's got your back.
Yeah, she's tethering you too. It's great. I love it.
Have you ever seen one of those dog walkers who it's like they're being walked by the dogs?
Yes.
That's what I feel like we do to Lucy sometimes.
Probably. I can totally see
She's
that.
like, slow down, guys. Slow down.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. We're going to get her a big Christmas present this year.
Yes.
Speaking of Christmas, around the Christmas story, we there's always like the nativity set, and every time I think of the Christmas story and I think of like the nativity, big figure, massive figure, specifically is the Virgin Mary, and so our sex question for today, when we talk about that, is this idea of virginity, of purity. And the question comes, what influence has the idea of the Virgin Mary had on how we view sexuality? Is this depiction of the Virgin Mary one that is honest, Is it one that's kind of set as a standard? And I wanted to get into this because I'm curious to hear, Kassia and Sarah, your perspectives when it comes to sexuality, purity, all of these things that surround this story, and how has that influenced or not influenced kind of your lives and like the way that you approach the holidays and the way that you approach life, since this is such like a corner piece of the story itself.
Definitely.
So that's the question.
Oh, so you want me to elaborate on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up in a pastor's home, and so the nativity story was and still is very prevalent as part of Christmas and why we celebrate. I also have a Germanic background, and so Saint Nicholas or Santa Claus didn't come on Christmas Day. He came the December 5th to 6th, so the evening of the 5th. And so Santa was never really a huge part of Christmas for us. And so we focused a lot on like the birth of Jesus and Mary. And because for a very long time, I've always learned that Mary was a teen, kind of 15, 14, when she gave birth to Jesus. And I remember being that quirky 15-year-old, and I'm pretty tall. And so in high school, I just did not know where my hands from my feet were, and the klutziest human on the planet. And most people will still say I still am. And so I just thinking like being pregnant at 15 would be just, yeah, I couldn't even fathom it. And now my husband and I are expecting it in February. And I'm like so thankful for the timing of what God had like put that now, because I'm now feel more prepared. And I'm 30. So it's like 15 years later than when Mary would have had her baby or had Jesus. And that's crazy to me to think. And yeah, so, but then also I think a lot of people get caught up in the virginity of Mary's birth around this time, because it's in a lot of our Christmas songs, right?
Yeah.
You know, the Virgin Mary gave birth, and it was a miracle, and it still is. And I think that our culture can really play a big part, like the Christian culture can really zoom in and focus on that part, where, you know, purity is super important and, you know, is something that you should, you know, use as a standard and try to ascribe to. I think that's the right word. But I think like anything in this world, there needs to be a balance. Because if you focus so much on the purity that it becomes something that you worship and idol, then you can lose out on loving yourself for who you're created to be. And I think that is a big struggle. And I know I struggled with it growing up. Was I holy enough? Was I respecting my body enough? Was I protecting myself enough to maintain this purity, virginity, holiness that Mary had or has, rather? And so there was like this war within myself, and I think within a lot of Christian young women. At Kassia, like you're in the similar boat, like you probably have felt or feel similar things.
Yeah, well, I was even gonna kind of, when you asked that question, Carl, made me think like the whole way like that their community responded, and like the Bible talks about how shortly after Mary was pregnant, she went to go visit her cousin, and some people say that was probably her fleeing, because who knew what was going to happen when everyone found out she was pregnant and wasn't married yet, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And like you said, like there is something to be said for valuing your body and how you treat it and view yourself, but also when people make choices, how we respond to those choices has a huge part, right? Because if a girl is afraid that she comes to someone, or like a guy too comes to like a friend or a family member and says, hey, something happened, I don't know what to do, and they're immediately hit with, well, you didn't stay pure, and now this X, Y, and Z are going to happen, and you're condemned, and there's no coming back from this, it's going to have a very huge impact on how that person now views purity and sexuality and all of these things. Whereas if you can approach it with some grace and say, hey, okay, talk to me. How can we support you in this? There's a very different response in that and a very different mindset that's formed.
Well, an angel had to literally come visit Joseph so that grace would occur.
Yeah.
Right. Because, like you can see different theological views of the nativity, but it looked like, Mary was fleeing because she was going to be stoned because she had sex outside of marriage. And nobody would believe a 15-year-old woman.
No.
Yeah.
And, it hasn't really changed. And I think it's not just women, it's also men, right? Where we look at youth in today's culture and we don't necessarily give them the credit that they do and value to the words that they say. Yeah. And we are so quick to assume the negative about them right away instead of, okay, let's listen to your story and let's give you grace in this and then let's work through that.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that no matter who you are or what situation you find yourself in, if you approach a conversation with grace, you'll get a lot further.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it's so important with what you both are saying, specifically if we're listening for okay, well, what kind of tools can we give parents or educators who are listening around this story of the virgin birth? And I love that you both are bringing in the fact that this is something that happened to Mary that she couldn't explain, that culturally would have put her in a lot of trouble, very physical, real danger.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you just hyper focus in on this one aspect. Oh, it's just the virgin birth and just the Virgin Mary. And we forget about all of the other players and characters in that story. The fact that she ran, I love that you brought that up, Kassia, that she ran and she fled to her Aunt Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a trusted adult that she can go and that she could talk to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, and how Elizabeth greets Mary with grace and compassion and being led to be oh, what's happening is not a mistake. What's happening is not something you should feel shame over. What's happening is something that we should celebrate. And how God facilitated that entire conversation. It's amazing. And also the fact that Elizabeth was a person that she could look to this teenage girl and be I know what you're going through because I'm going through the same exact thing. I've been there.
Right.
And so the tool that I would encourage to use when young people come to us and be I don't know what's going on with my body, is to be that trusted person that can listen to the story, that can understand. Because I wonder what Mary's response would have been if Elizabeth had shut her away.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's really important that you said that Elizabeth welcomed her in and said that well, we don't know what necessarily Elizabeth said word for word, but accepted Mary for what was going on, because a lot of women who come through the Atwell Center, they believe that the pregnancy is a mistake.
Yeah.
Right? Or, and we believe that no child is a mistake, right? And yes, the sin may have occurred in the act or, that leads to pregnancy, but pregnancy isn't the sin, right? The baby isn't sin. We're sinful, but there's needs to be a divide. And I think in one of our earlier podcasts with Michelle, you talk a lot about that shame piece, right?
Yeah.
And how that can make a huge difference on how you approach that conversation. Is if you approach any conversation with grace versus shame, what that will change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
100%. And it's so interesting that we're talking about this, and just I love how the conversation is flowing where we're talking about grace instead of shame, because the whole point of specifically where we are at right now in the Christmas season, we are in the third week of Advent, which is meant to remind us of joy. It's meant to remind us of the joy that the world experiences at the birth of Jesus. That grace, that mercy, that feeling of hopeful expectation, right? But I'd love to talk about this and go a little bit deeper, because sometimes, especially in the holiday season, there's this overarching feeling of like joy and happiness and grace and there's mercy, but people don't feel that at all. People sometimes feel really low, or they're struggling, or they're going through things. So for our question about relationships, yes, for some the holidays are filled with quite hard and difficult feelings instead of joy. So how can we support people who are going through a hard time during the Christmas season? Fragmented homes, lost loved ones, heartbreak, sicknesses, illnesses, things like that. So I'm curious. I want to throw this question out to you guys as well. How do you think that we can support people who are going through a hard time during the Christmas season?
Well, I think it comes back to the word grace. Like, I think that word continues to come up in this podcast for many reasons. No matter who you are, you need to come to the person or approach a person with grace every day. And you have to choose that. We're in the building commotion here in Hamilton, and there was a quote at the coffee bar, and it said, the next person you interact with, your actions will impact them. And I thought that was really cool, because that could be a smile, that could be a kind word, that could just be a little bit more, patience with waiting for your turn in line. And I know that, I was Christmas shopping this weekend, and there's hustle and bustle everywhere. And it's just like everybody's rushing to get things done. And, it's grace and just calm, and maybe like bringing that peace and calm with you wherever you go, and kind of that mindset, so that you can share that. Like, that's a big thing, because you don't know if this is the first Christmas without a mom or a dad or a grandpa. You don't know if, somebody's battling a serious sickness during this time. We can't read minds. And so the best thing we can do is to share grace.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have any kind of personal experience with that, Sarah?
Yeah. So in 2015, 2 weeks before Christmas, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. And it was a huge shock to myself and my whole family. Yeah. And I remember sitting in the surgeon's office. It was like a team meeting, I guess. They were kind of talking to me about like the next year of my life and how it would look like. And I said, I don't want to do chemo during Christmas. And I remember the surgeon looking at me, and she says, cancer waits for no one, not even Christmas. And as you know that from the beginning of the podcast, I love Christmas. Christmas for me is full of tradition in my household. Growing up, it has a lot of happy, warm memories. I grew up north, so there's a lot of snow as well. And it was just like this cozy time of peace. And I just didn't want that disrupted. And thankfully, I didn't have to do chemo over Christmas, but I had to do a myriad of appointments, radiology, chemotherapy, fertility, a bunch of different things. And I barely remember that Christmas, just because it was just so full. I remember compassion and grace from my family, but there's also a lot of sadness, because it was the start of an entire journey that nobody really
saw coming.
Yeah. And nobody really saw it coming. Nobody really knew how to react or what to do. I was 23 at the time, so young, healthy. Yeah. It just like kind of came out of nowhere. And so people were just dealing with a lot of emotions around this time. And yeah, so the biggest part is that, like, going back to grace, like, you have no idea what people are going through, what they're thinking about, what happened to them before they got to work or before they got to where you met them. And just taking a time to smile. And I know in North America, we can have this like face where it's like this thinking face, and it could make, feel like we're always angry. At least I get accused of having that face. My thinking face looks very angry. And then people are like, why are you mad at me? And I was like, I'm not mad at you. I'm thinking. But yeah, just being mindful of those things and calm and just slowing down. I think it's very important.
I agree. I think that like what you just said, like you don't know what people are going through. And the fact that we need to make sure that we, take some time to be like, oh, Christmas isn't everything that is just put on social media of like happiness and everything looks great and all the filters and all this crazy stuff. You never know what someone's going through. So taking time to just be with people and also just be with yourself is so important.
And reduce the expectations, because I think media filters, Instagram, Hallmark movies, which I love, they have this like expectation that Christmas is gonna it's gonna snow on Christmas, it's gonna be fluffy and white, and everything's gonna work out by Christmas Eve, right?
Yeah.
Santa's gonna come, or the miracle's gonna happen, fixed. Everything's gonna be fixed, right? You're gonna fall in love, everything gets solved under the mistletoe, all these things, right? But it's not, and you have to catch yourself that you have to give yourself grace in this time.
So I want us to stick on this one for a little bit because we're talking about filters, and so we're going to turn it over to our culture extraordinaire, Kassia.
Me?
Yeah, you. How can we avoid getting caught up in the mania of Christmas when social media is rampant with a filtered narrative of like rushed extravagance? And like, what do you notice about as far as like social media filters? Talk to me a little bit about that.
I think one thing that kind of like my fiance and I have been talking about, even like just
Wait,
life.
what did you just say?
My fiance.
Oh,
yes.
shoot.
We got
Congratulations.
engaged. It's very exciting.
That is so exciting.
But yeah, we've kind of been talking lately, not just with Christmas, but in general, but I think it especially applies at Christmas, just like the role of social media and our phones, and how much they can kind of overtake life because you're so focused on seeing what everyone else is doing and posting pictures so everyone sees the highlights of your life when they don't necessarily see everything else going on. And we've been trying to get better at taking like consciously like one day a week where we try and disconnect from our phones as much as possible. Maybe, still listening to some music, taking some pictures, like every now and then, like there are things you have to respond to, but as much as we can, like consciously choosing not to be texting people and not to be just sitting scrolling on Instagram. And I think especially around the holidays, that can be so valuable, especially like if you're having a family dinner, to not just have everyone sitting on the couch scrolling their phones, posting pictures, but actually like, hey, maybe let's all put our phones away for an hour and just sit and be together and talk and not feed ourselves constantly this narrative of what Christmas should look like, because that's not how it looks for everyone, right? Like you said, the Hallmark movie isn't going to be everyone's Christmas. Some people, it may be their first Christmas without mom or dad, or the first Christmas after a divorce, or just finding out that they're sick or have had a miscarriage, or so many things, right? That we don't know what's going on, that it isn't always this happy, everyone sits around the table and eats turkey together and whatever.
And the gingerbread houses come out perfectly. I've never actually seen that happen before.
Never. I don't know where they're getting their gingerbread
are always
kits.
Perfect.
Liar.
Wow.
I see your nose growing.
That's complete fabrication. It's not true. My gingerbread houses are not perfect every time.
Man.
Just most of the time.
Just most of the time.
Yeah, because I buy them pre-made.
I was going to say, where are you buying your kits? Because the kits we get are never...
They're the
perfect.
Worst.
I think you'd have to like make it from scratch.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think that's probably
Get out like a tape measure and a ruler and like...
Yeah, and then the consistency of the icing has to be like perfect. Maybe put some cement in there or something like that.
Cement
that could
icing.
do it.
Don't
Some
eat
super
it.
glue.
Yeah. Maybe that's what it is. On the Hallmark movies, maybe they use white glue
Probably.
instead of like icing.
Probably.
Makes
Probably.
sense now.
I'm gonna go with yes just to make myself feel better. So I think this was a great podcast. I think there was a lot to talk about. I do want to circle back just to the conversation that we're just having now about filters. And I think for our parents and people listening, I think it's such a crucial conversation to set like realistic expectations and talk about like what do expectations look like with our young people. Expectations in relationships, but also expectations around, realistic standards and understanding. I think I want to herald back to something that Michelle said in our first podcast of like understanding that a lot of human behaviors are very normative, but not all behaviors are good. And understanding that, you know, the behaviors that people take, especially teenagers who are trying to figure out life, that it's okay to not always reach this perfect virgin birth narrative of perfection, that it's okay to be human.
Well, and even along with that, like you were saying, like to parents especially, like the way that your child like views the holidays and like their emotions going into it are going to be mirrored off of how you are, right? So if the parent is setting all of these expectations that everything has to be perfect and we need to go buy all of these things and I can't eat the sweets because then I'm going to gain pounds and in the new year I'm going to have to diet, your kids are going to pick up on that. So even just being mindful of like how you're talking, and even if you're not a parent, just like the people who you're around, right? You don't know what other people are going through. So being mindful of the words you're choosing to use, the topics maybe that you're bringing up, of even just like not acknowledging that life is still hard during the holidays. It doesn't just go away for Christmas, right? And being open to having those conversations, I think, is huge.
Yeah, I can remember that something said when I was younger by people around me was like, well, we just need to get through the holidays. You're going to be happy for Christmas. Like, that's what we're going to do. And like, it's okay not to be sometimes. And it's okay to rest in that. It's okay to, you know, feel your feelings and, you know, not to set that precedent or put that pressure on people. Like, and what I've found is really amazing is that once you kind of take that pressure off and you give space for people to just be, it's incredible how that sense of joy and grace can come back in because you've allowed people just to have that space to just be where they are at. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I think that's a wrap.
I think so.
I want to say thank you, Sarah Gillman, for coming on the podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. As far as Atwell goes,
Yes.
Is there anything that you want to tell our listeners about Atwell? What's going on, where they can partner with the center during this holiday season?
Definitely. So most people know we have a baby boutique. So we accept gently used clothes from newborn to 2T. And so we always need those clothes, especially older boys, as well as the winter is upon us. Snowsuits, jackets, boots. Those are really important. So if your kids have outgrown those, or nieces or nephews or grandchildren, we would gladly accept them at both locations. So 40 Wellington Street in Hamilton or 154 Church Street in Oakville, as well as you can partner with us financially. We are a pregnancy care center in the GTAH and one of the most expensive places to live and work in Canada. And we love our staff and we are fully, we're not a widget service, right? So we have professional nurses that provide one-on-one support. We have, you guys who go into schools and churches and community organizations and continue this conversation beyond the podcast to youth. And, we have 2 locations now as well. And it's not cheap to run. So we would love monthly support. So you can just go to www.atwellcenter.ca/donate and it will bring you to our different ways that you can donate.
That's awesome. And Kassia,
yes,
if someone is maybe having a hard time this holiday season, is there any place locally that they can reach out to?
there are.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
What are those things?
Well, today I have the numbers for Atwell Hamilton and Atwell Halton. Specifically, if you're dealing with a crisis pregnancy situation or sexual health question, we have got you covered. Like Sarah said, we have our professional nurses, we have registered social workers. But if there's something else going on and you are not sure where to start, we can also help kind of try and direct you to something that's going to best suit what you need. So for Atwell Hamilton, our number is 905-393-8525. And the number for Atwell Halton is 289-529-0219.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of the S.H.A.R.E podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell.
Ding.
Notifications are always good. Share,
We like to share.
We like to share. You can share with your friends. If you need a Christmas present to give someone, you can give the gift of this podcast.
It's a free gift.
It's a free gift. It's a gift that keeps on giving. Twice a month on the second and fourth Monday of... Is that correct, Lucy? I'm just checking in with our... Yeah, we're the second and fourth. It's still a new podcast. We're still trying to make sure.
Second and fourth.
Second and fourth.
Monday.
Okay, yeah, that's the right thing?
Yes.
Okay, the second and fourth Monday of the month, you can tune in to listen to us talk about sex, relationships, and culture. So thank you guys for listening, and as always,
Don't forget to share.